Thank you for being here or signing up or joining or all of that lovely stuff. It's lovely, lovely, lovely to have you here, whether you are joining live or whether you're joining on replay. I've got 139 of you signed up for this session, so I think this is one that everyone's like, yes, we want to find more about. But again, as we always do with these, I've had lots of people like, I can't join live, need the recording, all of those sorts of things. So somewhere, hello, whether you are joining live or whether you are with me on the replay, hello, good afternoon. Monday, 3rd of Feb, February. I nearly didn't say the word February, but our February webinar. And this month is why we need to call BS on workplace wellbeing initiatives. Why we need to call BS on workplace wellbeing initiatives. If you have, if you've read my latest book, if you know anything about that, you'll know that this is a big topic that I cover throughout that. You don't have to have read the book. You don't even need to know the book exists. So we're gonna cover whether you are whether you're new to this space, whether you're new to kind of me and how we run these sessions, or whether this is something that you just keep coming back to over and over again. Hello and welcome. These sessions run for about kind of 45 minutes. That will include a Q&A. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to ask those questions and we'll get those covered for you. I'm going to be talking to you for about kind of 30 minutes. There's no death by PowerPoint, there's no selling, there's no upselling, there's no buy my this or buy my that. We don't do any of that. We just pick a topic, we talk about it, and if you've got questions, then we see where we go from there. If you're new, I'm Kelly. I am Kelly Swingler, burnoutologist. I've been in the burnout space now for over a decade. I know, I only look 21. But yeah, for over a decade, I have been doing this work now. My first burnout made me really seriously ill. My second almost killed me. And I suppose you would think that that would be enough to make me think perhaps something needed to change. But it was actually the death of my replacement that took me on a completely different track. I'd worked in HR. According to the CIPD, had been recruited at the time as UK's youngest HR director. I was managing a team, organisation of 4,000 in London, team of over 40. Was doing all of that kind of at 30. Board level position, kind of thought I'd made it. And then in the January of 2013, I started to experience like debilitating, crippling pain. It started 7 months of kind of hospital admissions. Didn't know what was wrong, didn't take a day off, and still continue to think that was the done thing. So didn't take a day off, didn't kind of do any of that. And even after my first burnout and my second burnout, I was just still convinced that what I was experiencing was this thing that was happening over here. Like I didn't feel like, if you'd have said to me, are you experiencing stress? I'd have told you no. If you'd have asked me if I was working too much, I'd have told you no. If you'd have asked me if I was doing work that I enjoyed, I'd have told you yes. However, in the first organisation where I experienced burnout, it was toxic, and I was definitely losing myself within that. So all of the work that I do now, everything that we do here at Kelly Swingler, everything that I do through the Burnout Academy, be it books, be it trainings, be it sessions like this, is all about really awareness raising, education raising, raising awareness of the things that we've got to stop brushing under the carpet. And I think whilst the World Health Organization burnout definition, I think it touches on the slight bit, a bit of the surface, but actually those of us that have experienced it, those of us that work in the space, those of us that have experienced it and work in the space, will say actually the World Health Organization definition of burnout does not even scratch the surface of what it is. And so for me, with all of the work that I do, really getting people to understand the significance and the severity and the importance of what this is, so that we're not just thinking, I'm losing a bit of interest in work, because it's so much more than that. So this is why I do what I do. I can talk forever on this stuff, which is why I kind of always caveat at the beginning to say that I'm only going to be talking for about half an hour. So if you've got questions, do ask. But today, as I said, we're challenging workplace wellbeing initiatives. We're calling BS on those. So if you do have questions as they come, feel free to type. Feel free to make use of the chat function. Say hi. Let me know who you are. Let me know why you're here. If you're joining live, what would you like to get out of the next kind of 40 minutes or so, 30 minutes or so? Let me know what you want to get out of this session. We can make sure that we cover it for you. So don't be nervous around the chat function. And I suppose a note, this is being recorded. Everybody will get the recording of this. The recording will probably come out to everybody around Wednesday. Once we've kind of got it edited and uploaded. When I say edited, I'm literally just topping and tailing the end, so everything else stays. If you do have questions or comments that you want answering, you don't want them to come up in the public chat, just ensure in the drop down that you're dropping down and just doing Kelly only. Direct message me and I'll ask or answer anything that you've got. There we go. Okay, so why do we need to call BS on workplace wellbeing initiatives? I think we've seen specifically since 2020, so if we go into kind of 2021 and beyond, workplace wellbeing has been allegedly top of the leadership agenda, right? People-focused CEOs, people-focused leaders, people-focused organizations have all been saying that wellbeing needs to be at the forefront of everything, right? People are finally beginning to catch on to the fact that if we have happy, healthy people, then we have a happy, healthy organization. And all of the data, all of the research, all of the stats, everything out there will link our health and happiness as individuals to the health and happiness of the organization. So that includes performance, that includes profits, that also includes things like customer satisfaction, customer engagement, employee engagement. All of the data is out there. And yet, despite saying that wellbeing is top of the agenda, we have seen continually since 2019 the number of people experiencing burnout increase significantly. Probably no surprise that throughout 2020, 2021 and 2022, those numbers almost trebled from what they had been kind of pre-pandemic. We also saw throughout 2020 and 2021 the burnout gender gap, or the gender burnout gap, whichever way you want to kind of deal with it, but also the gap. So the amount of women that were experiencing burnout versus the amount of men that were experiencing burnout, we saw that gap double. We also know that if employees do not feel that they can come to work as themselves, so any kind of masking, be that around any of the protected characteristics, be that around anything to do with their personality, be that to do with anything, ability, disability, religion, non-religion, beliefs, anything. Where there is masking, we also see increased levels of burnout. So we can say, yes, been on the leadership agenda, we can say we've ticked that box, but actually the reality is telling us a very, very different story. Since 2022, we've seen growing numbers of heads of wellbeing teams be introduced to organizations. So again, right, we would think, hopefully, or we'd at least hope, that seeing those numbers would give us some security, right? Some, I suppose, clarity, some hope that yes, wellbeing is taken seriously. And yet actually the flip of what we're seeing in so many organizations is that the wellbeing initiatives are just kind of things that we sprinkle on top of the crap that people are dealing with on a daily basis. Now, I talk a lot about how everything that we do is either taking us towards well-being or it's taking us towards burnout. And what so many organizations are doing is in every single thing, and I mean everything. So if we were to think about the employee life cycle, from recruitment right through to exit and everything in between, be it training, development, our pay, policies, performance management, our engagement, satisfaction, how we're communicated with, how we're considered, how we're talked to, how we're talked about, how we're developed and valued, and all of those things, we're actually seeing a decline in the way in which we treat people. We're seeing a decline in the way that people are treated from recruitment through to exit. We're seeing more and more organizations, more and more leaders forcing people back into offices. And again, whatever your view in terms of home working, hybrid working, being in the office working, but actually we're not creating cultures, we're not creating community, we're not creating communication or collaboration in any of those places. We just want people in the office so we can micromanage them more. And I'll come on to in a moment what's happening, I believe, with leaders to make that happen. But what we're seeing is this toxicity rise within organizations, people being treated less than they were all of those years ago. But because we've got the budget for wellbeing, we've got teams that are dealing with wellbeing, and they're just going to sprinkle all the stuff on the top. Therefore, we should be experiencing well-being in the workplace. And that's not how it works. We can't keep moving everybody further and further and further towards well-being every single day of the week, and then sprinkling a yoga class on top, or a different EAP, employee assistance program, or a slightly different benefit, and then go, well, you should be happy at work, you should be healthy, you should be absolutely fine, you should be well. And I think, again, we're losing a lot of what we mean by well-being, because actually for workplace well-being to be a thing, we need well-beings, right? We need to be well in order for our organizations to be well. And we're declining. Our health is declining. We look at various different stats that are produced by very, very different people, but different organizations throughout the course of every year. But on the whole, although we're living longer, our health is declining. If we think about the ways in which we're working, our sleep is being impacted. We're spending more and more time on screens. Many of us are carrying our work around with us in our pocket. We think of those that might be doing front of house jobs. We think of those that are doing frontline jobs. We think of those that might be doing more manual jobs. We're demanding more and more and more and more and more. People are working longer and longer hours. And we just continue to sprinkle this stuff on the top and say, well, that should fix everything. And it's not doing. Because the majority of what we are delivering is taking everybody towards burnout. And then we're saying, but this is what well-being looks like. And if we think about that from an individual context, right? If we think about it from an individual context, if I'm a 20-a-day smoker that drinks a bottle of wine every night, lives on greasy, fatty foods, is eating big meals every day, sits all day and doesn't move, doesn't do anything, is fixed on a screen all of the time, but then I say, well, it's fine because I do one yoga class a week. You kind of look at me like, oh, but what about all of your health? And really, that's what we're doing in our organizations pretty much Monday to Friday, however many days a week we are in operation, be that 5, be that 7. Be that 12-hour operations, 8-hour operations, or 24-hour operations. That's pretty much what we're doing. That's the equivalent of what we're doing. We're infiltrating that toxicity, that level of toxicity. We're moving people towards burnout and then just expecting these sprinkles of well-being to fix all of the issues. And it's not going to happen. Now, one of the big things that I see in terms of like forcing people back to offices, when I see and speak to leadership teams, when I speak to boards, when I speak to HR teams, when I'm speaking to managers, a lot of what I see is this high stress environment. Everything is a priority. And yes, we know that well-being should happen. Again, the same as us as individuals, right? We know we should be eating better, sleeping better, drinking more water, exercising more, getting more daylight, getting more fresh air, right? We know those things are the fundamental basics that should keep us happy and healthy, right? That should allow us really to be well-beings. And yet we prioritize all of the other stuff. We prioritize the work, the emails, the meetings, the constantly checking our socials. We prioritize all of the other stuff and then assume that the well-being is just going to happen at some point over here. And we need to be flipping that narrative. But from a workplace perspective, when we are in a state of high stress, for us as individuals, when we're in a state of high stress, you may have done this before in terms of things like the stress bucket analogy. High stress causes us to move into the primitive part of our brain. And when we're in the primitive part of our brain, we cannot be creative. We cannot solve problems. We cannot be solution focused. We're not positive. The primitive part of our brain, which is where our kind of fight, flight, freeze modality is, where we have all of our previous patterns and behaviors stored, that primitive part of our brain is really what drives us when we're in high stress situations. And the longer we're in high stress situations and the higher the stress becomes, the more our default becomes us being in our primitive brain, in the primitive part of our brain. When we're in the intellectual part of our brain, which we're able to get to when we're in low stress states, the intellectual part of our brain is positive, it's happy, it's healthy, it's high performing, it's solutions focused. Again, if we think about like maybe you've been at work, maybe it's not necessarily like chronic stress, and by chronic I mean high levels over a really, really long time. But think about those days where you've been really busy, where you've not had a moment to think, but you've been looking for the answer for something, right? Maybe it's a word that you can't quite find. Maybe it's like, oh, like I know how to do this, right? You've been looking for the solution to fix the problem. And you know it's in there, you know it's in your head, you know it's in there somewhere. It might, it's on the tip of my tongue. I just want to be able to say it and do it and do all of this stuff. And then it comes to you like as your head hits the pillow at night, or as you get into the shower in the morning, or that night, or when you're out walking the dog. It's like, there it is. And that happens because you have allowed that you're not in that high stress state anymore. You're allowing your thoughts to happen. You're allowing your brain to do what your brain needs to do. You're allowing it to kind of search and join all the dots and find all of those solutions. I used to kind of joke about, I didn't know all of this stuff then, but I used to kind of joke about the fact, right, that some of my best ideas would happen either whilst I was on the loo or whilst I was in the shower. I wasn't thinking about anything then. Literally wasn't thinking about anything then. It just kind of default mode, like, need the shampoo, water's rushing over me, need the shampoo. I didn't need to think about anything. And yet there was the answer. How many of us, how many of you have that downtime throughout the course of the day versus how many of you are running from 8 a.m. in the morning till 8 p.m. at night, meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, back to back, not drinking, not eating, not getting any air, not having time to pee. Again, that was a big thing for me in the kind of last couple of years before I reached that burnout. I would get on the train at night to commute home, kind of 90-minute commute. I'd get on the train and be like, oh my God. And I'd be like, I've been needing to pee since 9:30 this morning and I haven't been. Because I was just on that mode. And we think it's brilliant because we think we're getting loads of stuff done, but we're not being productive. We're not allowing our brain health. We're not allowing our brain to do what it's there for. We're just overloading. And the longer we stay in that state, the more likely it is that we come out of our intellectual brain where we have creativity, innovation, problem solving, solution focus, like positive, happy, all of that stuff, right, that we say we want more of. We move from that into this primitive state. We bring back all of our previous patterns and behaviors, right? This is why sometimes if you see people in a state of stress, they just keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again. What's the saying? I think it's something like, if like insanity is keep doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. Like that's the point that we get to. And you think, well, why? Like you look at some people and think, why are you doing that again? Why are you repeating that for the 100th time? It didn't work last time. It's not going to work this time. Why are we doing this? Why do we keep repeating the same stuff? Why do we keep repeating the same stuff in our organizations over and over and over again? Why do we keep having the same conversations? Why are we not moving anything forwards? And a lot of that is because we are maintaining this high stress. And we're assuming that high stress makes us productive, but actually it's the other way around. And high stress is moving us from the intellectual light bulb moment, creative, innovative parts of our lives, of ourselves, of our organizations, and pushing us into the point where it basically is just fight for survival. And then what happens? I talk up again about my burnout equation. Toxicity minus sense of self equals burnout. Toxicity minus sense of self equals burnout. And when we're in that high stress, when we keep repeating, when we're in that constant fight for survival, what happens then to the toxicity within our organizations? It grows. And the reason being, I may not be able to come up with the solutions, right? I'm not able to prove that I can come up with the ideas or that I can come up with the solutions or that I'm good at anything because I'm in that primitive brain. And I'm sat there going, oh, I just can't think. Why don't we try this? We did that last week, Ellie. It didn't work. Oh, yeah, okay. And then it's like, what do we, well, I keep repeating the same thing over and over again. But when I'm in that state, I don't know how to get myself out of it. You don't know how to get yourselves out of it. Your colleagues don't know how to get yourselves out of it. So rather than me change, because actually I can't see the solutions that tell me what it is that I need to fix, my behaviors become more toxic. So if I can't change and move forward, actually what's easier for me to do is try to quash you. If I can't change or fix or improve myself, it's easier for me to then start to make you look bad. This is where we start to see the growth of things like the backstabbing, the exclusion, the gossip, that, oh, did you know that she did this? Did you know that he's done that? That's where some of those things come from, because we're in our primitive brain. We're in this fight for survival. So the fight for survival then starts to fuel some of the toxicity. Our burnout equation, toxicity minus sense of self equals burnout. When we're in that primitive brain, we begin to lose some of our sense of self. As we start to lose some of our sense of self, we become even more toxic in our behaviors. As we become even more toxic in our behaviors, we continue to lose our sense of self. And then it's just this repeating pattern, repeating cycle that takes us one step closer to burnout. And leaders and HR teams and managers and everybody's talking about well-being. Let's do well-being. Let's do a charity walk. Let's jump on some exercise bikes. Let's have a new benefit. Let's do a gym membership. Let's do a yoga class, whilst moving everybody on this burnout scale further and further and further to burnout, further away from well-being, and then expecting the sprinkles to fix everything. And we continue to see it increasing, increasing, increasing. And the more busy we get, the more stressed we get, the more we start to, just clicked my notes, sorry, but the more busy we get, the more we start to repeat these patterns. The more our leaders, the more our people become more toxic, the more everything becomes a fight for survival. The more we just keep thinking, well, nothing's changing, nothing is improving, nothing's getting any better. Therefore, we've got to work harder, push harder, strive harder, because apparently working harder, pushing harder, and stressing everybody out is going to be the way to get us to the point of solutions. And that's not. It's the opposite. But there is neuroscience behind why we think that way. So as I said, intellectual brain, primitive brain. We think of our primitive brain, and I mean like properly primitive, right? We go like way, way, way back. Caveman, cavewoman times, and we would have been out hunting, where we'd have been needed to keep the fires burning, where we'd have been in our caves, protecting our tribes, our communities, our families. We'd have been going out to hunt. There's no point, at the point that we would have seen whatever it was that we were hunting, we wouldn't have then thought that now was a really great time to stop, have a nice picnic lunch, sip a few glasses of champagne, and everything's going to be okay. We would have needed to stay on red alert. So if we don't get the hunt, if we don't get the kill, if we don't take that back, it's a fight for survival. At no point do we think now is the good time to rest. And that's what lots of us are creating within our organisation. We're not allowing the relaxation time. We're not allowing the rest time. We're not allowing the thinking time. because the brain is saying, just got to keep going, just got to keep going, just got to keep going. So that's the primitive brain that's kicked in. The primitive brain tells us it's not safe to rest. And the primitive brain tells us that because our physiology, our neurology, everything that's going on within our body tells us that we are in a high stress emergency state. And the longer we stay in that high stress emergency state, the more our brain is trying to keep us safe and keep us moving and keep us going. All the while, we're not being creative. We're not being solution focused. We're not being positive. We're being negative. We're repeating the same things over and over and over again. And we just continue to sprinkle the well-being on top and say, well, that should fix everything. So the reason that I say we need to call BS on workplace wellbeing initiatives isn't because I don't believe in workplace wellbeing initiatives. I absolutely do. And in the right organizations, in the right conditions, for the right reasons, they make a huge difference. But the biggest thing that we need to be focusing on is how we're working. And that doesn't mean spending tens or hundreds or thousands or millions of pounds on new benefits or new initiatives or new ways of working or new tech or new systems or new platforms, new providers. It doesn't mean any of that. But we've got to look at how we are working. Because if all of us got to the point where we understood what it felt like to feel safe to rest, we understood what it felt like to feel safe to raise concerns and issues, if we understood what it felt like to say, I cannot do another meeting today, I do not have it in me, then we would start to see a difference. But what we're doing, rather than creating that level of safety, that psychological, emotional, physical levels of safety, we just keep going, and expecting all of this push and then continuing to sprinkle the well-being on top. And this is where we are getting it wrong. This is why we are seeing burnout increase. This is why we're seeing chronic illness as a result of the workplace increase. This is why we're seeing more and more people leaving the workplace because of health situations. This is where we need to be changing it. So workplace wellbeing absolutely has a place. It's a fundamental part. But again, we need to be well-beings in order to create well-being in our workplaces. But at the minute, what we're doing is on our burnout scale, well-being towards burnout, we're pushing everybody further and further to burnout and then sprinkling on top. And then leaders, managers, boards, exec teams are then saying, but we're giving you all this money. Like, what's the return? Where's the return on investment? And then we know, right, the budgets don't get spent, they get pulled next year. But we're missing the fundamentals, we're missing the basics. If we come back to sleep, hydration, nutrition, exercise, how much of those things are we really allowing our people to do within the workplace? How often do you go through a day where you've not eaten, you've not drank anything? How often do you go through a day when you've just been stuck at a desk all day? How often do you get home and you've still got loads of stuff to do because you've been in meetings all day? Now when you get home or when you finish, now you've got to actually be doing the stuff that you've not had time to do all day. And then we just expect to like shut the laptop, get into bed and go, well, I can't sleep. Because we're not having the downtime. We're not creating any of that well-being space for us to be well-beings. And we can only start a good morning if we've had a good night before. So we just continue to create and keep repeating the same cycles over and over and over again. So if we want to solve the burnout equation, right, start to solve the burnout equation, toxicity minus sense of self equals burnout, what we need to be doing is allowing our people, starting with us and then all of our people, to really understand their sense of self. I don't mean another like leadership program where we're just going to tick some boxes, put some people in some grids and then say, there you go, you're a great leader. But actually, who are you? What are your values? What's important to you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What are your drivers, your strengths, your motivators? What's important to you? What matters? Who's important to you? What impact do you want to create? How do you want to create it? What resources do you need? What support do you need? That's where we need to be starting the conversations. Not investing more hundreds of thousands of pounds in a leadership development program where it's just, this is the one framework and this is what we expect everybody to look like. We need to start with the sense of self. When we start with the sense of self, our people and us set the right conditions, we set the right tone, we allow ourselves that downtime, we allow ourselves our boundaries and our non-negotiables. We're better at collaborating with others. There's no more fear or competition. It's actually, how can we all raise each other up? Because I don't need to be scared of you. You don't need to be scared of me. It doesn't need to be intimidation. It doesn't need to be competition. Actually, we're all in this together. How can we best support one another? And the more that we start to do that, the more we eradicate the toxicity in the workplace. And as we do that, all of the wellbeing initiatives then become brilliant, right? They become brilliant add-ons. They don't just become the sprinkles, they become the cream, they become everything that fits in that cake that says, this is how we're all in it together. It starts to glue everything together. So we've got to stop thinking about it in terms of sprinkles. We need to be developing our sense of self. We need to be looking at everything that we do right the way through the employee life cycle and moving everything that bit closer towards well-being and further away from burnout. And when we do that, when we create the downtime, the relaxation time, the rest time, the thinking time, the collaboration time, the communication time, then we create workplace well-being. That's absolutely where we need to start from. We're either moving towards well-being or we're moving towards burnout. I'm going to leave you all there. Got maybe 10 minutes if anybody has any questions. If not, we can just finish it there. Does anybody have anything they would like to ask? You're being very quiet in the chat this afternoon. Any questions that I can help with, even just a yes or no? Give us a no if there isn't anything. But then if not, I will say thank you very much for joining. We're back again next, I don't know what we're doing next month. Let me quickly find that just while I see if there are any questions or anything that's coming through. Let's have a look. I don't even know where the next one is. But I'll find that then, just to see if any of you are going to type and give me anything at all. Questions, feedback, comments. Let's have a look. I think we are back next time. We are 4th of March is our next one, and that is how to identify the signs of burnout. So 4th of March, 4 p.m, how to identify the signs of burnout. I can't see any questions coming. So I'm going to say thank you very much for joining. I hope you found that helpful. I hope that's been useful. The recording will be out 2 days from now, so you should get that in your inboxes on Wednesday. So again, whether you've joined live or whether you have been watching on replay, it's been a pleasure to spend this time with you. And maybe I'll see you again at a future session. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much, and I will see you all again soon. Take care for now. Bye.